I lived in Adams, Tennessee, growing up from about ages 14 to 18. A couple of weeks after my family and I moved there, something unexpected happened. I was mowing on my dad's tractor, going down a hill when my horizon line violently was thrown around as the tractor tires hit something. I disengaged the mower, pulled the tractor around at the base of the hill I had just gone down. My blood went cold as I look up through the swath I had just cut, like a buzzer going down the middle of someone's head, making a lane in the grass. In that lane were 4 Native American burial graves. My parents started reaching out to anyone who might be able to help us identify the graves. Anthropologists, historians, accredited people, etc. Those people unanimously agreed that these 4 graves were from the Trail of Tears. They corroborated this from what I remember because of how the graves were laid. Very, very shallow, with a giant slab of stone where a gravestone would be. The fact that they were interned on a hillside to keep the water from sinking in and raising the bodies since they had to bury quickly. I consider myself a very logically driven and rationally minded person. Basically, I let my empirical senses try to explain something before I'll open myself to other possibilities. Yet, there were things that happened to me and my whole family that we weren't able to rationalize with the scientific mindset or anything logical. Event 1. The activity in our house started shortly after the mowing incident. We heard heavy knocking and pounding on the brick outer wall of the house, encircling the house. No matter where you were in the house, you could hear the knocking. Some nights I would hear running footsteps accompanying the pounding. This activity happened nearly every night. As the nights passed, I started feeling a heavy presence in my room. A suffocating one, like a heavy weight sitting on my solar plexus constantly. Whatever was happening decided to latch onto me. Event 2. Things continued to escalate. One night I was letting my golden retriever out to go pee. We had a ranch-styled house overlooking the Red River. The door we were exiting was on the backside of the house, facing the river. As I open the door, I start hearing faint whispering, something akin to leaves being blown across the ground. I looked up at the trees to see if the wind was blowing. Everything was perfectly still. It was fall in Tennessee, so tons of leaves on the ground. They were not moving either. The blowing leaf noise continued, but as it continued, it grew closer and louder. It sounded like a language of some sort. Like, how'd you imagine an incantation or something? Nefarious in the tone of the sound. I looked down at my golden retriever. All of the hair on her back was standing up, and she was snarling like a rabid wolf, yet not barking, just kind of frozen in a fear response. I started getting extremely nauseous and could smell sulfur. I was completely frozen when my dog launches herself through the door's threshold and starts gnashing her teeth, midair, snarling and chomping. The voices were now coming from directly in front of me. I could hear them as if someone was standing there a foot or 2 away. I grab my dog mid-air and pull her quickly inside, slammed the door and threw the deadbolt into place. The door and frame shook violently as a vicious pounding started hammering on the threshold. I ran with my dog to the center of the house, flipping on every light along the way. We sat there alone all night until the sun came up. Ginger, my golden retriever, laid across my lap, the entire night pressing into me while she whimpered for hours. All I could do was pet her and try to calm her down, which was also helping me downregulate. This was impossible though, the entire night until sunrise. The back door was thumping. Event 3. It happened when I was coming home from football practice. I had all my gear in a gym bag over my left shoulder. This is important because of how I entered the house. As I closed the front door behind me, I began sitting down the gear bag from my left side, which caused me to look right. The room when you first walked in was our library, where we had a leather couch, chair, piano, bookshelves, and a wooden rocking chair. There was something sitting in the rocking chair. My peripheral vision caught it first, the chair going back and forth. As my vision centered on the chair, there was a humanoid-looking shape sitting there, head glancing downward at the book it was holding, long black hair drawn down over its head and completely void of light. To picture what I saw, imagine the silhouette of a person, but rather a void of light. The light coming in around the edges of it seemed to be eaten up by the presence void, as the light spilled over the contour edges of the humanoid shape. Like how black holes are visualized, almost exactly, it felt like I had jumped off a bridge into ice-cold water. I blasted myself backwards against the door, screaming, and fell down. As I was falling, I saw the void blur suddenly as it shot across the walls of the house and out through a huge bay window overlooking the river. My golden retriever was in the next room, and she sprinted to chase the shadow across the walls, barking and clawing at the walls. After it left through the window, my dog came to me and laid on my lap until my parents got home. Event 4. I was fishing with my cousin Jack on the river by our house. We were right on the bend of a river, so the moon would be shining on both sides of the river, racing out at two lines like a 90-degree angle from the house. Super beautiful when you weren't on edge. The reason I bring this up, there was a lot of light on the river that evening. Jack was about 10 or so at the time. He reaches up and taps me. Does that lady need help? I looked to where he was pointing, and there was a pale woman dressed in white clothes going back and forth, picking up stones just to the left of us across the river. I had seen her many times before around the property, and whenever I would get close, she would disappear behind a tree or something similar would happen. Knowing this, I told Jack as calmly as I could that it was time for dinner, and he needed to go up to my mom immediately in an attempt to not scare him. When I walked him up and made sure he was on his way, I looked back over and she was gone, but I could hear a splashing in the water below. Event 5. Myself, my dad, his friends, and some other family members were staked out along the river bend on the gravel bar beneath the rise to our house. Nothing out of the ordinary at first. It was July 4th, and we were having an actual good time for a change. We were all spread out about 15 yards from each other. Each man had a low-end gas Coleman lantern. As the sun was setting, my dad looks over at me like something was bugging him. He told me later he felt like someone had just thrown a bucket of ice water over him before it began. The sun had just gone down when this happened. In unison, all the lanterns were cranked up full blast, then just as quickly became barely a flame. Then the fires roared to life again, down to barely a flame, roared to life. Then they went completely out. Right as the flames went out, we heard the most godforsaken scream by some woman across the river. Whatever it was kept on screaming, despite our best attempts to call out to help. As her scream reached a crescendo, it sounded like what I could only imagine a person's throat being cut interrupted her scream. The sound of a dead weight fall of a human body tumbled down the hillside across from us and splashed violently into the water. At this point, all the guys had their flashlights out. That's when something started swimming and splashing around in the water on both sides of the riverbed. The splashing receded towards the opposite gravel bar, and whatever it was got out and started pacing back and forth across the rocks there. We were pointing all of our flashlights to where the sound was coming from, but we couldn't identify where it was originating. It's safe to say we were running up the hill at this point. We all got inside the house, locked the doors, then gathered in the central living room. Nobody wanted to leave for fear of what was outside. We all stayed up that night because the wall pounding was more violent than it had ever been. Bam, bam, bam. Event 6. Lost time. I was walking through the woods near the Bell Witch Cave. One moment it was completely sunny and blue skies about mid-afternoon. The next moment it was overcast and looked like maybe 4 p.m. Event 7. Night terrors. Torture dreams, being held down and brutally drawn and quartered. Dreams of walking through the house and the void person placing their hand on my chest and pushing through my solar plexus. Body violently shaking in the dream like having a seizure. Event 8. Visited the Bell House plantation marker in a tobacco field adjacent to my family's property. Brought friends to try and prove that something crazy was happening to my family. The rite of passage in the area is to go to the stone marker, where the paranormal events happened hundreds of years ago. Then dance on the stone, saying, "I don't believe in the Bell Witch." I got them to promise that they wouldn't do that while we went. Of course, the moment we get there, one guy who doubted the legends in a massive way jumps up onto the stone marker and starts screaming, "I don't believe in the Bell Witch," as loud as he could. I get so upset at him. I'm the only one that knows the way back. So I said, "Come on guys, we're leaving." In this area, it's known as the Tennessee River Valley. So there's tons of flowing water. It's around these tobacco fields. The reason this is important is because of what happened next. We're making good time walking back across this crop field, hundreds of yards long. A mist starts rolling in from the river bends and begins to saturate the field. The temperature drops easily 25 degrees or so, and we start seeing our breath. I begin to smell sulfur in the breeze. As the mist became a fog, it began. I started hearing this wheezy and deeply cavernous sounding breath around us, like being inside a cave that was breathing. Out of nowhere, we started hearing these giant blasting sounds, and I realized something was walking on the chopped tobacco stalks. Side note, when they harvest tobacco, they use a machete and cut down at a 45-degree angle, leaving about 3.5 feet of brittle stalk poking out of the ground. When you step on said stalks, they disintegrate in a very loud way as they burst apart. This starts happening all around us, like an army of native spirits running around as if we were in a bandwagon battle. The blasts were coming from every single direction in the fog. That's when I hear it. That deep, cavernous noise turns into this giant sniffing sound, like some Lovecraftian beast smelling its prey just out of eyesight. At this point, I yell run in pure panic mode. We take off across the field, trying not to trip and be skewered on the stalks. They dry out and get really sharp where they harvest them. Also, Robertson County is the world's largest producer of tobacco per square mile, so these fields are everywhere. Fun fact, as we are exiting the field and our feet hit the gravel road, the lower center part of my back suddenly explodes in agony. I look down and there's a massive rock laying at my feet, and I realized that I had just been assaulted. By the time I got to my house and examined my back in a mirror, the bruise was about the size of a basketball and was already turning black. Event 8. Woke up outside about 3 in the morning. I was laying next to the 4 graves on the property. The night was awfully cold, but I woke up soaked in sweat. We lived there for so long that I have many events to share, process, and willing to have discussions about my time there with you all. It is really hard for me to talk about this stuff without re-traumatizing myself, but my friends and family are encouraging me to share my experiences with like-minded people, so I can try to find peace surrounding my trauma. Thank you for reading. So this encounter happened many years ago, and I was very young. It was in 2001 or 2002, and I was 11 at the time. My uncle was interested in purchasing some land near Red Oak, Oklahoma. I do not know exactly where, but it was several acres in a very remote area. My father, mother, and myself decided to accompany him one Saturday to scope out the property. From our home, it was a little more than a 3-hour drive, but we all love riding in the car. So while it was not going to be the most eventful road trip, we went just to get out of the house. Upon arrival, I remember being very underwhelmed by the place. No houses anywhere near, and hardly even any signs of life at all, apart from a few birds. And the wooded area wasn't exactly what I would call picturesque. Still, we parked our car off the road to go explore the woods a little. My uncle was talking about buying the land for hunting. Not really my cup of tea. As we walked through the woods, it was a very nice day, but still something felt off. Everyone in our group remarked about the eerie feeling, but my dad and uncle seemed to laugh it off. My mom had goosebumps and kept looking over her shoulder, which made me on edge too. She was very insistent that it was weird, and she wanted to leave, saying it felt like she was being watched. After a bit of hiking, I noticed that there was a small red building. I've seen bigger storage sheds in the suburbs, but it looked well built. My uncle said there was nothing about it on the listing, so we went to peek inside. The door was open, and inside there were open cans of food, a ratty blanket on the floor, and it stunk unlike anything I'd ever smelled before. Following this discovery, we all agreed it would be best to get back to the car. If there was some crazy hermit living in the woods, we didn't want to be around to find him. Only issue, we had walked pretty far into the woods and now weren't exactly sure which direction was correct. The eerie feeling really amped up, and we were all on edge. We ended up trekking another mile before we finally found the road, but we were further down from where we had parked the car. But at least we could just follow the road now. Walking along the road, we came across a truly unsettling sight. Right in the middle of the asphalt was a dark gray cat on fire. I have no idea why a cat was out in the middle of nowhere, or how it came to be killed and set alight. Obviously, this had just happened, but there was no one in sight. Naturally, we ran the rest of the way to the car. There was a huge scratch in the paint all down the side of it from hood to trunk. Thankfully, that was the only damage, and my dad was able to start it without any trouble, and we drove away as fast as we possibly could. My heart is sped up just recounting this moment. Definitely one of the scariest of my life. Needless to say, my uncle did not buy the land, and I'll always remember this terrifying encounter. But like anything over time, I sort of pushed it to the back of my mind, and it just became one of those odd moments you occasionally retell. The reason I'm sharing this is because I was reminded of it last night while binge watching some episodes of BuzzFeed Unsolved on YouTube, when they shared the story of a family that disappeared in the same area, while also looking at some land for sale. The disappearance of the Jameson family is the name of the mystery in the video, if you're interested. The family died in the same area we were searching, roughly 7 years after we made our trip there. There are many theories about their deaths, including the allegations of some sort of cult in the area, complete with something about dead cats. Coincidence? Probably, but the whole story gave me chills. So if my family narrowly avoided being killed by some witches or a cult or whatever, or if we just stumbled upon a hermit who didn't want us in his woods, I must have only been about 4 or 5 when I encountered the creatures in my room. I still had a toddler bed, not quite a single, the one that is converted from a large cot. It was low to the ground because I was prone to rolling out in my sleep. Near the foot of the bed, against the wall, there was a big red toy box made of plastic, in the shape of a treasure chest. The chest was crammed full of toys, mostly little figures of cartoons I'd watch: Street Sharks, Thundercats, Biker Mice from Mars, a few Pokemon figures, but mostly action men. I had a nightlight, a little plug-in one at the side of the headboard, in the shape of a crescent moon. It glowed a faint orange that stayed on throughout the night. My mom always left my door ajar a little. We had a streetlight situated right outside the hallway window. It shone a strip of white light onto my wall. The toy box was next to the door. It was a small room, but the door just missed the sides of the box when you opened it, as if it had been purposefully built for the space. I was awakened by the sound of cracking and squeaking, the noise a dog makes when chewing a plastic ball. Small bumps and thuds came from the foot of my bed. I sat up and rubbed my eyes, mouth agape. Still practically asleep, I sat and listened for a few seconds. The sound of rustling, things being clanged together. Snapping and gnawing crept over my footboard. As well as the constant clatter, I could make out faint squeaking, very low and quiet. But it was there, more like that of a guinea pig than a mouse. But something was different about it. At the end, instead of rising higher, the tone dropped into a small growl. Slowly, I raised myself onto my hands and knees and crept forward to the bottom of the bed. This side of the room was dark. The nightlight's measly orange glow didn't reach past the bed. I peered over the footboard at the toy box. The lid was open, which was strange, and toys littered the floor. I watched as the noises came from inside the box. Something was moving, but amongst the figures, I couldn't tell what it was. An action man came tumbling out onto the floor. One of the flippers it was wearing had been shredded. The other leg stopped in a mangled stump halfway down. Examining the other toys on the carpet, all of them had bite marks. Limbs missing or faces chewed to into deformed plastic mush. Little hands, arms, and bits of chewed up parts were scattered on the floor also. Bewildered, I raised myself up and leaned forward, trying to get a better look inside the chest. At first, I still couldn't distinguish what was moving. Letting my eyes focus, I made out something furry. At first, I thought it might be the Furby I had in there, but whatever it was had its back to me, hunched over. Its fur looked damp and spiked up in messy clumps. A long, thin tail, covered in small hairs, slithered upright, the end twitching from side to side. I noticed something else move within the chest, and, scanning the whole thing, I could make out two more tails, both different sizes, one longer, one shorter, protruding from deeper inside the mound of toys. I'm not really sure why, but whatever they were, I didn't want to be in the room with them. They scared me. Slowly, I crept from my bed and tiptoed towards the door. Reaching it, as it wasn't far, I placed a hand on it. Still looking at the box, still watching the tails flicker, I cautiously opened the door. Silently, it swung open at first. The white stripe of light from the hallway grew as the exit out of the room grew larger, even though I'd done it countless times. I slowed down once the door moved closer to the edge of the toy box, intently watching the distance between the two. As I slowed, the hinges of the door creaked loudly, making me jump. I froze on the spot. I listened out for the sounds of movement, but there was none. The chewing, the snapping, the gnawing, they'd all stopped. Turning my head, I peered at the toy box. I was met with two whitish yellow eyes. They reflected the light of the crescent moon in the hallway. They didn't seem to look directly at me, more off to my right, at the door. A nose wrinkled and leathery, twitched as the two long slits extended and retracted. A slow, wheezing breath escaped as a mouth began to open. It grew wider and wider, taking over most of the face. Incredibly sharp, needle-like teeth dripped with saliva. Bits of plastic and fake hair had been impaled and wedged in between them. There seemed to be no pattern to them. They just protruded outwards or downwards in all forms of thickness as size. What looked like horns or ears, I couldn't really tell, protruded from atop the head and around the eyes, as if the eyelids stretched into a pointed, contorted spike. The creature didn't move. Neither did I. Slowly, and with very little noise, toys were pushed out of the way and two more heads arose from the medley, all staring in the direction of the door, all white and yellow-eyed, like pools of molding milk. My heart drummed on my chest. Tears accumulated in the corner of my eyes. The creatures were different sizes, from a very small one to one the size of maybe a large rabbit. This one opened its mouth wider than the other and let out that squeak I'd heard before. It was just air at first, a whisper, which rose into a muted squeak that lasted a second or two, then dropped dramatically into a low grumble, maybe a growl. This snapped me from my frozen state, and I swung the door open as quick as I could and bolted down the hall. I could hear the patter of claws on the laminate flooring behind me. A sensation rose from within my stomach, like a hot burst that flowed through my body. I remember wailing as I ran, feeling the tears stream down my face. My mother's room was at the other end of the hallway, closest to the window. I ran past my brother's room. His door was closed, past the open toilet door, and slammed into my mother's. The pitter-patter on the laminate changed to thuds on carpet. My mother's bed was one of those ottoman ones, so it was very high off the floor. Before I reached it, I leapt, slamming into the side, kicking my legs and grabbing handfuls of duvet. I pulled myself up. A pain shot up my left leg from just above my ankle. I cried out, and my mom spun around to face me. "What's up, babe?" she murmured, pulling me onto the bed. "There's monsters in my room," I said through tears and shaky breaths. "It's just a bad dream." Little man, She pulled me close and cuddled me up under the thick feather-down duvet. I cried for a while, but the lulling and stroking of the hair my mom did sent me off to sleep. The next morning, I'd pretty much forgot about what happened, and being influenced by my mom's comments, put what I could remember down to a nightmare. Getting up from the bed before my mom had awoke, I headed back to my room. The door was open wide, and from the hallway, I could see the top of the toy box open. Creeping to the doorway, parts of toys still littered the floor, but there was no sounds. It was deathly quiet. I flicked the main light on and scanned the room. Nothing. I knew my mom wouldn't believe me if I told her what had happened. So instead, I picked up all the bits of toys and put them back in the chest. Once I'd tidied up, I walked back into the hallway and headed for the bathroom. I climbed onto the step next to the toilet and pulled down my pajama pants and nighttime nappy and had a wee. My hand brushed past the bottom of my leg when I pulled my pants back up, and I winced. Contorting my back, I turned and looked down at my leg. There, at the bottom, was a long, bloodied red mark. I told my mom when she woke up, and she said I must have caught it on the bed or the toy box during the night. For a long time, I'd forgotten about that memory. Until 26 or so years later, whilst in bed with my wife, my 3-year-old daughter came running into my room in the middle of the night, saying there were monsters in her room with big white eyes. The memories flooded back to me. I haven't been able to find any other story like it, so out of desperation, I thought I'd put it on here and see what others say. A repressed memory of a bad dream and a coincidence from a 3-year-old, or a childhood memory long forgotten, unlocked by a second encounter.